Hello, and thanks for joining me for this week's My Thriving Child Coffee Chat. Today we have a fun activity that we're going to talk about ways to grade and adapt for different skill levels, and it's St. Patrick's Day themed. So this activity is looking at making a St. Patrick's Day version of a sensory bin. So that would be, of course, a pot of gold. And sensory bin activities are great for working on different fine motor skills, so different grasp patterns to pull different things out of the bin and put them in the bin. And then also for that sensory piece, so just exposing your child to different textures and things like that. So I also included another executive functioning piece and then also some different activities that you can do that look at visual perceptual skills too. So again, when you break down these activities, there's a lot of different developmental skills that you can work on with your child in a fun way. And it feels like play and fun, which is how kids learn the best way. And I will always offer that occupational therapy perspective of how do we adapt and grade this task to meet a child where they're at and to give them ways to develop those skills that is the just right challenge for them. Nothing too crazy, but also nothing too easy. So finding that middle ground with them. So again, this is what I'm calling the pot of gold activity. And the first part of it is something that I was brainstorming up that you could add the executive functioning aspect of things. So executive functioning is planning, gathering materials, and executing that plan that they made. So in the context of this activity, a child might make a list of all the things that they want in their sensory bin. So either they're handwriting that list, or they're tracing it, or they're copying it, or they're in charge of putting check marks next to each item after you find them. So there's lots of ways to add in that visual motor piece too. That handwriting or tracing or imitating or making check marks would be that visual motor, along with this whole executive functioning piece. So they've got their list. If they're old enough or they're at that skill level where they can go to the store with you and pick the items out and cross them off, is an even better step to add for executive functioning as well. So that first piece of planning for the activity is great for executive functioning. So then you move on to the actual activity. So different ideas of things that you can add to the sensory basket or bin or bucket, whatever you want to call it. So since this is the pot of gold theme for St. Patrick's Day, what would be fun are gold coins, different types of beads, glitter. You could find, a rainbow or leprechaun object that's good for an activity that I'll talk about later. You can have them find rocks outside and paint them gold or green. You can get different felt strips, different types of fabric. Really get creative with it. The options are endless, and just basically the point is to give them different opportunities to touch different types of textures as well as use different types of grasps. So if it's a smaller object, they're going to be using that pincer grasp. They may have to use a power grasp if it's something bigger, and just working on those different fine motor and then that tactile sensory skill. Tactile meaning touch. So those are just some ideas of things that you can put in the bin. You can also get like a black plastic cauldron as well and put items into that so it really looks like that pot of gold. So that's kind of item ideas, again, that you can put into your pot of gold. And then there's lots of things that you can do once you've made that pot of gold. So of course, putting things in, taking them out is a great skill. And if that's where they're at, that's a great thing to work on. Just again, that grasp pattern and feeling around for different textures and talking about the different textures, whether they like them, whether they don't like them, are they bumpy or soft or smooth, those sorts of things. So building familiarity with those different types of textures and getting that exposure at a gradual rate that they're comfortable with. Another activity that you can do to work on visual discrimination skills is to have them pick out different items within the sensory bin and sort them either by color or shape or just type of object. So visual discrimination is looking at, can they identify different characteristics of the objects, whether that is the size, the shape, the color, a certain design on the object. So really bringing in that visual perceptual skill, visual discrimination into the activity is something kind of fun that you can work on with it. And again, it's always good to bring in the language and talk about, okay, what are those differences? What makes them different? What makes them the same? That's a huge skill that can be generalized to a lot of functional things in today's world. So you can also work on visual discrimination skills. Drink a little coffee. Not visual. We just did visual discrimination. So figure ground skills. So figure ground is being able to identify a specific object in a busy background. So if you think about the sensory basket or bin being that busy background, and then they're having to find a specific object within it. That would be working on those figure ground skills. You can make that fun by getting like a special leprechaun object or rainbow that they have to find out of the basket. Another activity that you can use is working on that skill of stereognosis. So being able to figure out and recognize the form of an object without having that visual input. So they have to really rely on that tactile sense and really hone in on that touch sense to find the correct object. So say you're looking for the coin, they're wanting to look for something round. And you can do this, kids, like it if they can close their eyes and have to search for it in the bucket. So that can be something fun to work on that skill. And again, you can grade these things by, if they're working on colors, sort by colors. And, if they're having a harder time with visual discrimination, you can work on that skill more specifically. And so there's lots of different ways to make it easier or harder, or focus in more on the sensory aspect of things versus the fine motor. But this kind of can give you a starting point of ways to work on all of those skills. And I also have a podcast as well that goes over all the same information. So if you would rather hear it there, you can too. It's under My Thriving Child. And I will be coming out with a weekly episode for a coffee chat that I need to work on drinking more coffee during each episode. But I try to make them shorter, so 10 minutes or less, in respect for your time, and just give you an activity that you can do for the weekend ahead with your child that works on those developmental skills. And then that occupational therapy perspective of things, of how can we break down this task and adapt or modify it to match where your child is at so that they can thrive and develop those skills. And then also going into just the reasoning behind all the aspects of the activity and what skills you can really work on with this simple, fun activity. So that is it for today. Thank you for joining me for the coffee chat, and I will see you next week on Friday. Bye.